Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraed Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak for the first time in such an auspicious occasion as Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaja's appearance day. And also, it's my mother's birthday too, coincidentally, so it works out. And so I just want to seek the blessings of Sri Radhanila Madhava and all the devotees over here to give me their mercy so I can speak something that can please Krishna, please you guys, all of you, and it can also benefit everyone, including me. Today we're going to speak on Canto 3, 25th chapter, 7th verse. And can you go to the, go to the verse, yeah. Twenty-fifth chapter, 7th verse. Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asadindriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asadindriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asadindriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Let's recite it 3 times together. So Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asad indriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asad indriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Devahutiruvacha Nirvinna nitaram bhuman Asad indriya tarshanat Yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandam tama prabho. Word to word. Devahutiruvacha. Devahuti said, Nirvinna, disgusted, Nitaram, very, Bhuman, O my Lord, Asat, impermanent, Indriya, of the senses, Tarshanat, from agitation, Yena, which, Marina, being vigilant. Prapanna, I have fallen, Andam Dhamma, into the abyss of ignorance. Prabhu, O my Lord. Translation. Devahuti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses, for because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. So can someone read the purport?
Here the word asad indriya darshanat is significant. Asat means impermanent, temporary, and indriya means senses. Thus, asad indriya darshanat means from being agitated by the temporarily manifest senses of the material body. We are evolving through different statuses of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body, and therefore the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary, or asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses, being contaminated by matter, are not acting properly. Devotional service, therefore, involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed Krishna consciousness, we have reached sad indriya, or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service, whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. Devahuti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing the instructions of Lord Kapila.
Thank you. Can you go to the PowerPoint? Okay, so just a summary of what has happened so far is that Devahuti, she is a princess that marries a great sage Muni named Kardama Muni, and they have 9 daughters and 1 son. And Lord Vishnu himself blessed Kardama Muni, her husband, that she and her will have Lord himself as their child, as their son. So Kardama Muni, after they have the children, he leaves her to pursue transcendental knowledge and renounces his material life. And so Devahuti, she feels, she laments, she's sad because her husband left her. And she feels that maybe I didn't utilize the association of my husband as much as I should have. And so this leads to Devahuti remembering after her husband leaves that Brahma told her, and even her own husband told her, that her son is God himself, and so she can get instruction from him. So in this chapter, she approaches Kapila Muni for instruction, her own son, who's God himself. So the topic that I'm going to cover today, I wanted to focus on one specific thing. So it's how to receive transcendental knowledge, because Devahuti is a really great example of someone who receives transcendental knowledge in a really proper way and fully benefits from it. And that's something that we can all learn from. Okay, can you go to the next? Oh, sorry. I can just, yeah. Okay, so on Friday, we covered what is transcendental knowledge. In the first verse of this chapter, it stated that Kapila Muni, he descended to this world to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of everyone. And so, do you guys remember what we said was transcendental knowledge? What we discussed?
Topics about Krishna.
Topics about Krishna. Anyone else?
I guess knowledge pertaining to the soul and Krishna and our relationship between the two.
Yeah, those are all good answers. So in the verse for the first verse for this chapter, Prabhupada in the Prabhupada he says that the knowledge that Kapila Muni is giving is transcendental knowledge, and he says simply to understand that one is not spirit, one is not matter but spirit, is not sufficient knowledge for understanding the self. One must be situated in the activities of Brahman. So knowledge, transcendental knowledge is understanding what goes beyond the body, the spirit soul, but it's also about acting in that knowledge. So why do you guys think that, what will be the benefit? Why is transcendental knowledge important?
Because it transcends anything that's contaminated with material, sense enjoyment and anything of material nature. So it helps us become purified.
Because if we believe that we are spiritual beings, then, and we understand that we're eternal and that we're not this body, then what is the use of knowledge that isn't actually relevant to the soul?
Yeah, what I'm basically asking is what would be the result of having transcendental knowledge? Why is that important?
It helps us understand who we are.
Okay.
And understand the goal of life, and the meaning of life.
One more person. Okay, you can go.
I heard Vijay Prabhu, our Minister of Book Distribution, he explained it that without transcendental knowledge, we're stunted, like a plant that's in a small pot. It can't properly grow, but then once we have transcendental knowledge that we're not the body, then we can fully grow to our normal, our full potential.
Yeah. So all of them are correct answers. There's many correct answers to this. So I'll just explain some of the things that it said in the Bhagavad-Gita about the result of why transcendental knowledge is important. So in Bhagavad-Gita 4.39, Krishna says that a faithful man who's dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So in this, one of the benefits he says is that one attains spiritual peace, self-satisfaction from transcendental knowledge. One isn't trying to crave satisfaction and happiness from external material activities, and one doesn't need other material external relationships or objects to be happy. You can be happy in oneself. And so everyone is in the pursuit of happiness, and so transcendental knowledge really gives us that inner peace that we are all searching for. And then in Bhagavad-Gita 2.39, Krishna says that, "Thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works." So in this verse, Krishna basically is saying that if one has transcendental knowledge, then one can become free of karma. And karma is what keeps us in bondage in this material world, in this repeated cycle of birth and death. And so if one has knowledge, then one can cut off karma and achieve liberation. And Krishna directly also says in Bhagavad Gita 5.17 that when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. So transcendental knowledge is important because it ultimately leads to liberation. And so this is similar to what Arjuna said, where there's three types of knowledge that we must all know, that is the core of all knowledge, which is Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. And Sambandha is understanding the relationship of everything with Krishna. Abhideya is doing the work, acting in that knowledge, that process. And then Prayojana is achieving that goal of that knowledge, which is in our eternal relationship with Krishna. We are reinstated in that. So knowledge includes all three of those. And ultimately it leads to, from acting to finally achieving that ultimate goal, which is explained in the Prayojana knowledge. So we can also see the result of transcendental knowledge from examples in the scriptures of what happened to people who listened and gained transcendental knowledge and the result of that. So can any of you guys think of examples of people who gained transcendental knowledge and what happened to them?
Comes to mind Dhritarashtra. He was living like a dog, they say, accepting food from the hands of his enemy, quote unquote. And it was a pretty piteous condition. And then Vidura enlightened him, and he left with him and actually attained the spiritual world by giving up his attachment to safety, security.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can think of Dhruva Maharaj. He wanted, all these material things to feel happy about himself and feel better about his situation. But by gaining transcendental knowledge, he actually found that happiness. He said he compared what he was looking for to broken pieces of glass. Mm. So transcendental knowledge gave him like that diamond.
Yeah, that's a good example. Anyone else want? Okay.
I was thinking of Mrgari the hunter. When Narada Muni came, he was half killing animals as his profession, and after Narada Muni had shown him the result of his actions, how he would end up suffering extremely in a hellish situation due to his reactions, he really transformed, and the next time they came to visit, he was trying to carefully avoid stepping on the ants. That's how much compassion he had developed.
Yeah.
Maharaj Parikshit, he heard from Shukadev Goswami for a week and transcended death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are all really good examples. So from that we can see what can happen if we have transcendental knowledge and receive it properly. So why should we learn how to receive transcendental knowledge? We can kind of see the importance of knowing how to receive transcendental knowledge by seeing the examples of people that had so-called knowledge, but they didn't benefit from it at all. An example could be Hiranyaksha that we read just recently. He was born from a great sage, and he knew scriptures, but he still ended up becoming a demon. And also Jagai and Madai from Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. They were born in Brahmana families, but they ended up being the biggest criminals that ever were. So even though they knew scriptures and so-called knowledge, so-called transcendental knowledge, but they didn't actually, there was something missing. And so in order to actually derive the full benefit of transcendental knowledge, one needs to know how to receive it properly. Anyone can think of any examples of people? There is people even in our own lives that, for example, somebody might be born in a devotee family. They have all the knowledge, but then they might not know they might not have received it in a proper way. And so even if they have knowledge, they won't fully benefit from it. So it's really important to know how to receive that. Yeah.
Bhaktivasime Sikacheti, that I'll explain the mystery of this science. Krishna says to Arjuna, I'll explain the mystery of this science to you because you are my devotee and my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're saying, it's not just the knowledge, but there's a mystery within the knowledge that's revealed to those who have the heart for it.
Yes. Yeah, so we need to know how to receive that transcendental knowledge properly. And so like the really great example is what we're learning about right now is Devahuti. She received transcendental knowledge from her own son. So I'll just be sharing some of what I learned from how she received transcendental knowledge and what we can learn from her in that way. So the first thing in this, verse is Devahuti basically says, "I'm done with this material world. I'm done with the disturbance of the senses," and that's a really big part of her life. So she gets suffering. Her husband leaves her, but what she does is she doesn't just sit there and forget about it and then try something else, like, oh, okay, I wasn't happy with this, let's eat ice cream. Like, no. she introspects, like, okay, this material world, it's not giving me happiness. Prahlad Maharaj, he compares this material world as chewing the chewed. So we think we are going to be happy by something, but it's just an illusion of happiness. When we actually do it, we don't feel happy at all. And so Devahuti, she has intelligence to understand and introspect after she has the difficulty that the nature of this material world. And so there are 4 levels of intelligence. So some people might, to come to the point that I am done here in this material world, people need different experiences. So there's 4 levels of intelligence. The first is just by listening, someone can understand that, okay, this material world is not for me, and then they might not even need to try everything, and they just know. And so that might be possible for some people to just be done with the material world in that way. And then there's some that need to see it as someone else going through that suffering to realize that this is not the place. And then the third level intelligence is one needs to experience the suffering oneself in order to understand. And the least intelligent, which I would say maybe like I could include myself in this, but it's people who, even after experiencing the suffering, will still try to gain material happiness and not be completely done with this material world. So Devahuti, she's really intelligent because she's done after. She doesn't try to experience material happiness after this. She realizes, I'm done with this material world. And so I want to ask you guys, when was a time when you felt sick from the disturbance of the senses? I just want to say that the part about I'm done here, I'm surrendering to Krishna is a constant, it's an everyday thing, because our mind is always changing, but it's an everyday thing. So when was a time when you felt this way? Mm-hmm.
So where I'm from, in the summer, it's very common for people to have barbecues. Mm-hmm. So I remember even after becoming a vegetarian and just following the 4 regulative principles, I would walk by and I would smell the barbecue, and because of my conditioning, I'd be like, oh, that smells so good. And then the intelligence kicks in and it's like, actually, no, that's flesh that's burning right now. So then once I can think of that, then it's like, ew. Mm-hmm. I can't believe I thought that this smelled nice. Mm-hmm.
Krishna's really brought me to the end of myself recently, because I have really bad back pain and neck pain. And I'm just, what? You can't hear me? Krishna's really brought me to the end of myself recently, because I just wake up and have the whole day just fighting back pain and neck pain, and I'm just like, oh my God. It's really a great way to kill the enjoying spirit.
Yeah, that's true.
So, a few days ago, we had ice cream. And I had too much of it, and then I got sick because I couldn't control my senses.
Yeah, I relate. I also ate that ice cream. I probably ate the most out of everyone. But yeah, so one really needs that I'm done here. It really needs to come from the heart. Someone can't tell you that, okay, this, like, some people just have that level of, they need to experience the suffering. They need to be in the material world and experience it to be finally, sincerely from their heart, receive transcendental knowledge when they finally realize that, okay, I'm done here. Okay, so another thing that Devahuti does is she approaches a spiritual master, and she asks him questions. And so one of her qualities is that she's really humble. And humility is really important, because even if someone realizes that they're suffering in this material world, one needs to respect someone enough and realize that they have more knowledge in order to approach them in a humble way and receive that knowledge. And she's very humble because she approaches her own son for knowledge. And that's not something you might see in this material world. If a child tries to tell a parent to do something, usually it would be the opposite. They would not listen to them at all. But she literally makes her son her guru and and asks for knowledge from him. And she sees things as, and that humility really helps her see things as they are. That, okay, my son is God, because if one is really has that ego, then even if one might realize that my son or someone that might be in like a lower socially than us is actually really a great person, if one isn't humble, one won't approach them, and one might not even realize that they are as great because one doesn't want to admit that. So she's very humble, and because she's humble, she's also really vulnerable. She opens her heart. That is one of the exchanges between devotees, is to open one's heart in confidence. And so she does that because she is humble. She realizes that she has faults, and she's not afraid of putting that before her own son. She asks, after Kardama Muni leaves, she asks, what's the nature between man and woman and matter and spirit? So it pertained to her, and so she was very vulnerable, and that was as a result of her humility. And she was very submissive as well. In the first canto, the sages, they say that Sutta Goswami, he knows the scriptures and has received them properly because he is very submissive to his spiritual master. And so to understand scripture, one needs the blessings of the teachers, and in order to do that, one needs to be really submissive to them. Another thing that Devahuti did is that she understood the relevance and application of this knowledge to her life. It wasn't just this knowledge that she just knew, but she actually saw how it related to her own life. So she asked questions. It was an active process for her. She thought, okay, this is my goal. I want liberation. What is stopping me from achieving this? Okay, these are the doubts that are stopping me from achieving this. So how can I resolve these doubts and achieve the goal of life? And so she saw it as something that was an active process that was helping her to achieve her goals. And so she asked questions that would help her achieve that goal. And that is really important to receive transcendental knowledge, is having a positive role model in one's life who exemplifies that knowledge. Since it's irrelevant to me, I'll just mention like for devotee children, it's, as they grow up, even though someone might have so-called transcendental knowledge, one needs someone who is living that knowledge, who's actually really inspiring one to be a role model, as a mentor to actually benefit from that knowledge, and one needs that connection. Yeah. So one needs to apply that knowledge. So it's all useless unless you actually use what you know. Like I gave the example before, if you learn all these things in college, but then you don't apply that and then get a job, then it feels like a waste of all that time to just learn and then not actually apply that knowledge and then achieve the result of that knowledge, which is that job. So knowledge is not just knowing, but it's acting in that knowledge and then achieving that benefit of that knowledge fully. And so what happened to Devahuti? I'm just gonna spoil it for you guys. So just so you know, this thing works. She goes back to Godhead. She after hearing from Kardama Muni, she becomes completely detached from material happiness. She had the best aerial palace, the best maids. The celestial people envied her for everything she had, but she gave it all up and she just meditated on Lord Vishnu. And she didn't do this because she had to. Or it was a burden, I have to give this up, so I guess I'll just give it up. But it's because she really, really desired. Jai Radha Nila Madhava. So she gave it up because she really desired something higher. And so she knew that compared to that something higher, the things like material opulence didn't mean anything. There's that story of Sanatana Goswami and the Touchstone. And there was a Brahmana, and he saw that Sanatana Goswami, he's a great devotee, he had this touchstone that could make anything into gold in his dustbin. So he was confused. He's like, hey, can I have this touchstone? And Sanatana Goswami, he's like, okay, take it. Yeah, I don't really even care. Just take this. So he took it. But then he played around with it for a little bit and had fun. But then afterwards, he started thinking, why did he give it away so easily? This is such a great thing. He must have something better than this. He's not telling me. He has a secret. So he went to Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami, he said, yeah, but you have to give up your touchstone to get the secret. And so since he realized that, okay, this must be something really great, he gave up the touchstone, and then that's when Sanatana Goswami gave him the holy name, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And so it was because he realized that there was something greater in relation to that. Everything else seemed so tiny. And even in the Bhagavatam, it's said that when one practices bhakti, one automatically gains knowledge and detachment from this world. So it's not something that has to be forced. As the more one does devotional service, the more one applies oneself to conscientiously do devotional service, not just mechanically, then one automatically feels the material attachments slipping away, and one doesn't even want them anymore after a while. So that's what happened to Devahuti. She had higher taste, and so all the lower taste went away. And so she achieved what we all want, which is to go back to Godhead and not suffer in this material world again and again. So that's what we can learn from Devahuti. Okay, so summary. To receive transcendental knowledge, we need to understand the sick reality of this world, need to approach a suitable guru humbly and resolve our doubts. And the most important, we need to apply that knowledge in day-to-day life. We really need to understand how important this is to our own life, the relevance of it in our own lives, not just see it as I just know things, but it's actually applying it as well. And so recently we had Shyama Sundar Prabhu who came to the Krishna house, and he was saying how we should read the Gita or any scripture thinking about that Krishna is speaking to us through this. And so understanding that this is something that is relevant to me right now, that can really transform how much we benefit from that knowledge. So I want to ask you guys if there's anything you can think of in your life that you can do to see the relevance or the application of this knowledge more. Maybe even something you already do right now, but in a better way, to see its relevance. Purnamrita?
What helps me is to really try and be present during class, and then to not go about my day mechanically, as you said. So it's not like, okay, Bhagavatam class, okay, breakfast, okay, back to the farm, but rather Bhagavatam class, okay, go through the motions, but then when I have downtime to actually reflect on what I've heard and see actually what is it that is relevant, and how can I just apply what I learned, or how can I understand what I learned, and just understand how it's relevant, what's the lesson here. And what I like to reflect on is that everything that we hear every time is literally Krishna speaking to us, even when devotees speak.
Yes.
So I would say reflecting on what we hear, and then just being introspective.
Arjuna?
In my reading yesterday, we read about knowledge and how, I wrote it down. Culture of self-knowledge can bring detachment. Without detachment, there's no meaning to knowledge. So, I also remember in the 10 offenses, it's considered an offense to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. And so, I was just thinking about detachment and how we can apply that.
Yeah, it's really important. Like Devahuti, she sacrificed so much to serve her husband and to achieve knowledge. She needed to sacrifice and be detached from material things in order to achieve it. So that's something that we can all learn from her too.
what I think I would do is ask those senior to me, because for many years they've had the experience of applying this knowledge, and by hearing from them, then maybe becoming aware of how they apply this knowledge in different situations involving me, then that can help me with the application of that same knowledge in my own situations.
Nice. Armando.
Hare Krishna, Mother Roshni. Thank you so much for the wonderful class. I am thinking, I really appreciated the point on humbly approaching someone who, is senior to us, or someone who, has, walked the path. I feel like it's, oftentimes it's difficult for me to become vulnerable to someone else and feel like a fool for not knowing, the things that they do. So a lot of times, I see how I could benefit greatly from their knowledge and their experience, and help me transcend from that contaminated mentality that, I have to think of myself as less than, or not appreciate someone's knowledge and understanding. So, thank you.
Yeah, it requires some courage, sacrifice, detachment to be able to sacrifice your ego. It's being vulnerable. It's like sacrificing your ego to achieve something greater. Anyone else have anything that they want to share? Okay. Arjuna.
On that same point, I was thinking about how when you approach someone, part of the vulnerability is that you accept what they say, and you don't just only accept what's pleasing to your senses. And a vulnerability aspect is that you follow what they say, even if you personally don't agree with it at the moment, but you know that's good for you in the long term.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It requires humility to, like I said, humility helps us see things as they are. If we are not humble, then we'll filter that knowledge to our ego. So we only choose what we want to do at the end. So what was the point of asking anyways? If you're not humble, you won't see what you actually need to do. Yes, Prabhu.
Wonderful presentation, Mataji. Very, very nice. It just, realized me that this transcendental knowledge, as Krishna says, that tadvidhi pranipratena paripashnena sevya upagdeshyati te jnanam jnaninam tatudashina. So, approaching a authority, approaching a senior devotee, approaching a guru require two things, Krishna says. The one is surrender, another is service. If one of them is not there, then process will never be complete. You may do service, but if there is no surrender, then that will be flattering only. Yes. So surrender is like two slices of bread, and between them butter is a service. So when surrender is there, and then we do service, and then you ask question, then whatever senior authority says, it immediately sink there. And that's why many times we tend to ask Guru what I wanted to do. Rather, we should ask Guru, how can I serve you? Because we are most of the time we are attached to the service which we like, not the service which Guru wants us to do. That. So we should, and Srila Prabhupada says that in front of Guru, we should act as like a foolish person. So that let him speak. But most of the time what happens is we wanted to speak to him. No, we should keep silent. Let him speak. Take his instruction, what he wants us to do that. We may be attached to one particular service, we may be good also in one service, but what Guru wanted to do us, then actually we can, even if we are not good in that service, we will do excel in that service. So this is realization. Thank you, Mother.
Yes, that was, yeah, I did think about that. That Bhagavad-Gita verse is really important, and even in the verse that the Bhagavatam verse we read in the Nashtaprayashu Bhadreshu verse, it says, or Srinvatam Swakatha Krishna, also like one needs to do service to the devotees and hear Bhagavatam, both of those things, in order to completely be free from the impurities in the heart and achieve liberation. So one needs service to great devotees is really important in developing that proper attitude towards them, so we can actually receive that knowledge in the proper way. Yeah, Evan? Oh, Guru Bhakti Mataji.
We often hear a lot of classes where the emphasis is on humility and approaching an authority, but there is also an onus on us which is not emphasized sometimes. We have to vet the authority or the Guru. We have to make sure, just as the Guru tests the disciple should also test the Guru, not in a challenging way. Like when Arjun asked Krishna, he said, Krishna is telling him, no, I spoke these signs to the sun god. What did Arjun didn't say, liar, liar, pens on fire. No, he said, humbly, I don't understand what you are saying. Because we are the same age, how can it be? So in order not to be cheated, because Kali Yuga is full of cheating propensity and false gurus, it's very important for us to also vet the authority, to see that they are doing or following the guidelines or doing what they purport to do. In this way, we will not be cheated.
Yes.
So it's very important for us so that we don't get hurt or we don't make the wrong choices and it's too late. So sometimes I feel we don't give enough emphasis to that, because usually the person who's giving class is seen as an authority, but we also need to examine, we need to do our homework too, otherwise we will be cheated.
Yes, that is a very good point. Yeah, and from Devahuti's example, like she accepted Kapila Muni. She's getting instruction from God himself. And she didn't just accept that he's God just like that, but she knew because her husband, who's a great sage, told her, Brahma himself told her. And so she knew, okay, this is God himself. And so she receives it from God himself, which is like the ultimate authority for everything. And we also, through disciplic succession, receive that knowledge that God himself gives. And so we need to make sure the representative is bona fide. I think it's almost time. I need to go to something else, sorry. Because it's Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaja's appearance day, so I think it's important to talk about him today. The Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he is the guru of our founder Acharya Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Very intelligent, erudite person. He was born in a devotee family from a pure devotee who's also in our disciplic succession, Bhakti Vinod Thakur. And he was a very special son. And there's a story that once the Rath Yatra cart of Lord Jagannath was passing by, and a flower, it just stayed over there and got stuck in that path when they were over there. And the flower garland, it fell on Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And so Bhakti Vinod Thakur prayed for a great devotee that would help him, and that was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, his son. And he was the only disciple of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, who's a very great renunciate, very humble personality, who didn't take any disciples, but it shows how great Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was that he accepted him as his own disciple. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he also really emphasized he used modern approaches to further preaching. So he knew like the principles, and he knew like which details could be changed in order to achieve that goal. So he was the first one who allowed some sannyasis to wear suits and ties, made dioramas in temples. He had his disciples go to the West and preach. And so he did all of these things, innovative methods that no one had ever done before. Something else that is very important, relevant to this topic, is that he told Srila Prabhupada that whenever you get money, print books. And he was very upset, and near the end of his life, when his disciples, they were fighting over the temple, marble in the temple, getting rooms and such, he was upset because he didn't think like building temples and such was as important as distributing transcendental knowledge through books. So for him, book distribution was very important, and so book distribution is very important to him. And in order to the way to uphold value someone is to uphold what they think is important. That's the best way to make them proud and happy. So he really so book distribution, it needs to be done in order to distribute that transcendental knowledge. And yeah, his press was named Brihad Mridanga. So yeah, I guess it's almost time. But if anyone wants to share anything, any stories that they know of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj that they found really inspiring, or if you have any questions, then yeah, please go ahead.
Krishna, I often meditate on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's vrat that he did. He spent close to 10 years just living alone in a small hut with no possessions, eating just a little bit every day, and just chanting all day long, chanting Hare Krishna all day. And I think he chanted 1 billion names of Krishna. So that was his vow.
Oh, yeah.
And after doing that, then he took up preaching. So I often reflect on this, that if we want to have impact in our preaching, we need to do the internal purification. We need to seriously connect with Krishna and develop our relationship with him before we'll be able to have anything to give others.
Yes. Speaking of his vow, but when he was young, he accidentally ate a mango that wasn't offered to Krishna, and so after that, when he realized it wasn't offered, he gave up mangoes for his whole life, so he never ate them ever again. So he had a really strong determination. Yes.
Srila Prabhupada wrote a really amazing poem about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Is it cool to read it? It's like 8 stanzas.
Yeah, you can read it, yeah.
Okay. Adore, adore, adore ye all the happy day, blessed than heaven, sweeter than May, when he appeared at Puri, the holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. O my Master, the evangelic angel, give us thy light, light up thy candle, struggle for existence, a human race, the only hope, his divine grace. Misled, we are all going astray, save us, Lord, our fervent pray. Wonder thy ways to turn our face, adore thy feet, your divine grace. Forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls, paying most heavy the illusion's toll, darkness all around, all untraced, the only hope, his divine grace. Message of service thou hast brought, a healthful life as Chaitanya wrought. Unknown to all, it's full of grace. That's your gift, your divine grace. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast moved. This gives us a life anew and fresh. Worship thy feet, your divine grace. Had you not come who had told the message of Krishna, forceful and bold, That's your right, you have the mace. Save me, a fallen, your divine grace. The line of service as drawn by you is pleasing and healthy like morning dew. The oldest of all, but in new dress, miracle done by your divine grace.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I did come across that poem, and I was like, I kind of want to read that. So, but I was like, I don't know if I would have time. So it's nice that you read it. So, yeah. Any last? Okay, it's actually 8:30 exactly. So, I guess that would be the end of the class. But thank you everyone for participating. I really appreciate it, and yeah, please pray for me. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj.
who are going through such situation to immediately bring, if you cannot